Okay, so we discussed the last couple of weeks Tefillah Tal. That we will say, please God, on Thursday, the importance of Tal, the beauty of Tal, even more than Geshem. We went through the alphabetical across the Tefillot. That was the last couple of weeks. And then we just started last week, Ya Eli V'Go Ali, which is a piyut, which is well, I guess piyut is best described as a liturgical poem. And poetry. We've lost our feelings for poetry. We don't have poets the way we used to have. By the way, this was. I'm not an expert at all in poetry and medieval poetry, but this was a Sephardic talking about the Sephardim, and Mishmal told that this was the Balei HaTosfot didn't do piyut. That's not what they did, as far as I know. The Ashkenazic Jewry was very halachic focused, and for all kinds of reasons, partly there because were living in Christian Europe, and it was the Dark Ages, and the Christians, the larger society, wasn't engaged in these type in philosophy. That wasn't their thing. So the Jews we are always influenced by where we live. I don't know how some people can say otherwise. So and the Jews who lived in Spain, basically, that's what Sfard is and was. 90% of Jews probably in the 13th century were living in Spain. It wasn't like 50, it was like way dominant in Spain. So of course, Spanish culture was much more enlightened, progressive, modern, whatever terms you want to use. And the Jews were impacted in positive and negative ways. There was much greater assimilation, etc. The same issues we have nowadays. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There's nothing new. But the Sephardic world, they were very much into poetry and philosophy and stuff. Rabbi Yehuda Levi, and of course we know. I mean, this they don't. They'll go over some. They don't do any poetry anymore. But all the keynote, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, all these things. See on. We say some of them on Tishba, but there's this beautiful poetry that we don't study. Most of us don't know it, and it's unfortunate because it expresses the longing and the yearning and the emotions of the Jewish people. But it's also interesting to know that most of these great rabbis also wrote quote unquote secular poetry. They didn't only write religious poetry. They wrote love songs, all kinds of interesting things that today it's hard to imagine the Rosh Yeshiva, writing a love song poetry, But anyways, that's the way it was. So Yaeli is we mentioned that it only came into the Siddur in the 18th century, and I imagine there's still shuls that may not say it. It's it's not, you don't have to quit your shul if they don't say it. It's like it's not the end of the world. But that's the minhag we say. We discussed last week why we don't say it on Yizkor the Joy, and we said the basic theme is we're standing in front of the Beit Hamikdash. That's what Musaf is all about. That's we miss the Beit Hamikdash, so to speak, more on Yontif than we do on Shabbos. The most obvious reason is because there was a mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel on Yontif. There was a mitzvah for Jews to go to the temple in Jerusalem. Obviously, most Jews did not do that. I mean, don't kid yourself and think every Jew went to the Beit Hamikdash 3 times a year. But hopefully they would go once a year, once in 3 years, whatever. Now, obviously, some probably did go up and probably depended on where you lived. And there was a mitzvah. So the Yamim Tovim, the Regalim, are much more Beit Hamikdash focused, and they're more korbanot brought on Yontif. I mean, every Yontif, of course, right? Every Yontif is we go two, 1, and 7, right? Everybody, we've discussed that before. Every Yontif has shtei parim, 1 ayil, and shivat kvasim. Has 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. That's we bring on Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, Shavuot, and we'll leave Sukkot out for the moment. And Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Shmini Atzeret, it's almost the same, but it's not 2, 1, and 7. It's 1, 1, and 7. It's a par, 1 par instead of 2, an ayil, a ram, like an every Yontif, and Shivat Basim. So all the holidays are pretty much all the same, 2 and 1. But you already see that the Torah already is highlighting that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Shmini Atzeret is one type of holiday. Rosh Chodesh, which is the introduction to Pesach. That's how the Exodus began. Moshe, God speaks to Moshe and Aaron on the first Rosh Chodesh Nisan. In 10 days, you're going to leave Egypt, or in 10 days, you're going to prepare the process to leaving Egypt. 4 days later, you'll take that animal that you took on the tent, you'll slaughter it, you'll put the blood on the doorpost, whatever. So Rosh Chodesh, that's our first holiday, Rosh Chodesh. We're allowed to work on Rosh Chodesh. It's not a yontif, but it's a moed. It is a holiday. and there's special korbanot brought, of course, and we say half Hallel, and we daven Musaf, so Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, Shavuot is 2, 1, and 7, and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, which means here is 1, 1, 7, and Sukkot, we double things. Sukkot is 13 to 7 in Parim, because we want to get our universal, right? Pesach is the particular holiday. Sukkot is the universal holiday. Pesach is the holiday of the Jewish people, Jewish nationhood. Non-Jews are not allowed to participate in the Korban Pesach. Somebody yesterday in chat, one of the office secretaries came in the staff room and asked me, Rabbi, are you allowed to invite a non-Jew to your Seder? Because, lots of people know that, right? Everybody hear this question before? Can you have a non-Jew at your Seder? No one?
What's
Yes.
the problem?
Why is it a problem?
I don't understand. What's the problem?
Oh, what's the problem? Oh, so people have this idea, well, because a non-Jew wasn't allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. So that's true. He couldn't have the Korban Pesach. We don't have that today. There is another technical problem, but whatever. It's like one of these problems. Don't worry about it. You got other things to worry about. The technical issue, and it's not Pesach, it's every Yom Tov. You're not allowed to cook for a non. You are allowed to cook on Yom Tov. Everybody knows that's the difference between Yom Tov and Shabbat. But you're not allowed to cook for a non-Jew. So there was a fear. No, you invite a non-Jew over. So you're a nice host. A non-Jew says, "Oh, you made chicken. Yeah, I like meat better. Oh, I'll get the meat out of the freezer. I'll put it in the microwave, heat it up on Yontif for you." So we're afraid, right? So Zev shaking his head. Oh my gosh, that's crazy, right? So that's sort of what the poskim say today. Like we don't cook, and we cook in advance, and it's not. So that's not. I told her she should have non-Jews for the seder, and I mentioned her what I always like to mention, and I'm sure I mentioned it here in the past. Rav Schechter told us, and yeah, I don't know if I have it on tape, but I heard it with my own ears. And I'm not on tape, I heard it live. The most important people to invite to your Seder are your intermarried cousins. That's who you should be inviting to your Seder. You have to invite your friends to the Seder. They have their own Seder. They don't need it. You have to invite your intermarried family, not Jew. We want to connect. Intermarriage today, it's not like it once was. It's totally different today. And we don't want to tie up. We don't sit Shiva, chas v'shalom, for somebody who intermarries anymore. At least I sure hope not. And so therefore, we want to reach out to them. So that's what you should invite. They're not just, so that was a fascinating thing, but I think it's very powerful. Anyways, so, but Pesach is a particular holiday. Sukkot is the universal holiday. And therefore, we're being the 70 parim, and then we double Shnei Elim instead of 1 and 14 Kvasim, because we mentioned this other context, because Sukkot is 2 holidays. Sukkot is the conclusion of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. It's one of the Shalosh Regalim. And Sukkot is also the conclusion of the high holiday season, what we call. There's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And we know Sukkot is connected to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. It's also connected to Pesach and Shavuot. So it's a double holiday. That's why it's Chag. In the Mishnah, the Chag, and that's why it's Man Simchatenu. That's why Sukkot is the most important holiday. And therefore, we double the korbanot. But be that as it may, so Yontif is korbanot, there's the Beit HaMikdash. It's a much more temple-oriented holiday than on Shabbat, and we mentioned this in the past. That's how Rav Soloveitchik explains why there's no Kabbalat Shabbos on Yontif. Okay, we wouldn't call it Kabbalah Shabbos. Why there's no Kabbalah Yontif? Why don't we say L'chuna Ranana on Yontif? So the L'chuna Ranana, which is only only 400 years old, that minhag, but we don't have any. We don't say Mizmor Shir. We don't have any introduction. We just say Baruch Hu. That's how we start. Baruch Hu Atad Hashem Hamarak. We don't do anything. Why not? So Rav Soloveitchik, very simple. Because who welcomes who? The host welcomes the guest. So on Shabbat, we're the host and we welcome God. So we welcome God. You put out the red carpet. Shabbat Malkah is coming. Wow! You dance in the fields and you turn around and you're all excited for God's coming to spend Shabbos with us. So we have to greet Him. We have to welcome Him. We don't just run into Shabbos. Yontif. God is a host. We're in God's home, right? The Beit HaMikdash is God's home. Beit Tfilah Yikarei, it's His home. The shul is our home. It's our home, and God comes to visit our home in the shul. That's how halachically. That's Rav Soloveitchik always explain. You have to treat your shul like your home. I have a big, this is one of my pet peeves. People who know me in Orchaim know, I walk in the shul in the winter, I take off my boots. I occasionally slip, but I mean, it's like I don't do it 98% of the time because you're not allowed to walk in the shul with boots on. You would never walk into your living room with boots on. Are you crazy? So why do people walk in? And they throw their coats on the back. I throw my coat in the hall, but people throw their coats on the back of the chair. Can't do that. You don't walk into your kitchen and put your coat. You hang it up in the cupboard. So that's how you're supposed to treat the show. You might miss So you'll be 2 minutes late, an extra minute late to shul. Okay, come a minute earlier, but it's not really right. I have to be melamed zchut on the Jewish people, so people don't do this. And I don't know, maybe in your shul they do, but whatever. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they say, well, in my home we do trample in the dining room with our boots on and 6 inches of snow. But I don't know. I don't know too many people who do that. So, but it's your home, and you have to treat your home like your shul, no worse than your home. It also has to look nice. If the carpet is all dirty, you replace the carpet. If the window's cracked, you get in the window. Like people. I once was in a shul. I don't want to mention what shul, but it's here in Toronto, of course. And where somebody said, yeah, shul, they don't have any money in the shul. Says, oh, the members have a lot of money. Just the shul doesn't have so much money, but the members of the shul have a lot of money. So the shul has to have as much money as a member, if you know what I mean. I mean, in a certain sense, if everybody in the shul lives in a 4,000 square foot home and goes away for Pesach, and Weissen goes to Florida 3 times a year, and Canada canceled their flight to Israel this year, unfortunately, for Pesach. So that shul should look like that's the type of people who daven there. Mamish, the people are poor, everybody's on welfare in the shul. Okay, you're in the Lower East Side when you immigrated from Europe and you don't have any money. Okay, so you build a shtibel. What can you do? But when everybody's building a nice home and the shul looks like it was 60 years ago, nobody lives in the house they lived 60 years ago. They knocked down the house. They put up a new house. So they've got to put up a nicer shul. Okay, enough. But anyway, but that is true. So that's why. So Kabbalah Shabbos, we're welcoming God to our home, and when we go to God's home, He doesn't. We don't welcome God to our home and the base of Mikdash. It's God's home. So that's it. Okay, back to Yaeli. Any questions, Zev? You like what I said, or you're not? Or you're not into that? Okay, it's okay. You can argue with me. Everybody. No, you're muted. You're muted, Zev. Maybe it's better you're muted. I don't know what you're going to say, right? But okay, all right. So we did the first paragraph. So we're standing in the Beit Hamikdash. That's what Yaeli is, a prayer to stand in the Beit Hamikdash. And I'm sorry, I said I can't find it online. You can open up your Siddur. There are not so many words, and half of it is a pasuk in Chumash, which will show in 1 minute. Yaeli v'go'oli et yasvali kortecha. We did this last week. Hayava yeh, hayava oveh, kol goyed metecha. He was, is, and will be. That's the Shem Havaya. That's the Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's what God's name represents. The Yud Kei Vav Kei. He was, he is, and he will be. So, Kol Gayed Metech, we mentioned last week that it means all the nations of the world will come to recognize God. That's the Beit Hamikdash, is Beit Tfilah Yikarei L'chol Amim. The Beit Hamikdash, we're very universal. The Beit Hamikdash is like always on Sukkot. It's very universal. How does Vayikra begin? Last week, Adam ki akriv mikem korban. Adam, a man, and the Rashi. I think it's in Rashi. If not, it's Medrash. But Adam, they say Adam means mankind. The korban is not. That's not a Jewish idea. A korban chatat is a Jewish idea, but you want to bring shlamim, metoda, a nice thing to say thank you to God. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome in them. We're very pluralistic, and I mean that in all seriousness. So everybody's welcome. It's a very universal idea because the Beit Hamikdash represents peace and world peace. It's all nations will come to pray. So that's what I mentioned Art Scroll for reasons I don't agree. I don't really understand. And I know we discussed Susan last week, the goy, the plural. I explained that it refers to all the Jewish people. I just don't think it makes sense in context, and I don't think that's what it means. And I don't think that's the role of the Beit Hamikdash. It's a much more beautiful thing. Yes, we pray that we should et yatzva. We'll be rooted to call you. You are everybody, not just us. We have a mission. Abraham is Av Hamon Goyim. It's not a Jewish mission. We're thinking we're thinking universal, messianic. The temple is rebuilt. So we're thinking much more messianic terms than just the Jewish people should recognize God. Of course, that's true, but it should be everybody. And then we say, V'toda, I don't know what tune they use for you. Every shul, V'toda, v'la ola, v'la mincha, v'la chatat, v'la asham, v'la shlamim, v'miyim, kol korbanet. Is that the tune you use in your shul? I don't know. Okay. So now, so that is this week's parsha. That's why I saved it for this week, right? Everything. So let's take a quick look. This verse that we're going to say 3 times on Thursday morning and Friday morning. It's 3 verses. That's all. This period is 3 verses, and then at the end of each verse, we quote the following pasuk. Just let me share my screen here. And that's what we're going to read tomorrow in Parshat Tzav. And that's this pasuk. This is sort of the end, right? There are 5 korbanot, right? And I guess they're not all mentioned here. Ola, mincha, chatan, and nasham. Oh, yeah, they're all 5 mentioned. Yeah. There are 5 korbanot. And this is, there's Ola, mincha. The Torah mentions shlamim, I think, first in Vayikra. I don't know why they put it out of order. If you look last week's Parsha Vayikra begins with Ola. Why an Ola? And it's korbanot nidava, right? We have 4 types of korbanot really. We have a korban yachid and a korban sibur. We have a individual sacrifice and we have a communal sacrifice. So individuals bring sacrifices for all kinds of reasons. So when in the Beit HaMikdash, where they brought korbanot, only a korban sibur, only a communal sacrifice could be brought. Individuals were not allowed to bring sacrifices on Shabbat or Yom Tov. But the korban. The korban tami that they brought every day, all the korbanot on Musafa we just spoke about 217, 117, 13 of 214 for all the korbanot. Those are korbanot sibur. They're bought from the machatzit hashekel. That's what Parshat Shkalim we read 4 or 5 weeks ago before Purim, before Adar. Right, the new year of the temple begins. Like the new year begins in the Torah. Rosh Chodesh Nisan. HaChodesh is Elechem Rosh Chodeshim. Pesach Nisan is the beginning of the year. So the machatzit hashekel would be announced a month before. Give people a month before. Tax season is ending on the 30th of Adar, and then everybody had to collect. Everybody had to bring in their money, their half shekel, and that money was used to all kinds of missions. There's a whole chapter. There's a whole masachet in Shas. I don't know if they do it in Daf Yomi now. I can't remember. They do it. So you were showing me. I don't understand this, but Masechet Shkalim, one of the 63 Masechet, is the laws of the half shekel. It's actually a very interesting Masechet. Lots of interesting stuff there, and some stuff about how the temple ran. There is no Talmud Bavli on it, like all the things related to the temple. There's only Talmud Bavli, I believe, on 37 of 63 Masechtot, like not much more than half of Shas. When you learn Daf Yomi, you miss out more than half the Mishnayos, because the Mishnayos of the non-part we have are actually longer and more than we have. But you miss out half of Shas if you just learn Daf Yomi, because you miss out all of his rhyme, all up to Haras, and a few things here and there you miss out. So Shkalim has no Mishnah, even though it's in Moed. It's Shabbos, Erevim, Psachim, Shkalim. Very interesting. They put Shkalim in Moed, not with Kodshim. Very interesting. Because it had to do with the holidays, getting the temple ready for all the holidays. And there's no Talmud Bavli, but there is a Talmud Yerushalmi on it, like there is on Zeraim. Most of Zeraim has the Jerusalem Talmud, because for the rabbis living in Jerusalem, it's much more relevant. And for some reason, Daf Yomi learns Yerushalmi, I think, for Shkalim. I don't know why, but maybe somebody who can tell me why. Okay. Anyway, so there are 2 types. Though the half shekel pays for the korban tzibur. That's one half of the korban system. And then there's korbanot chova and korbanot nidaba. There's voluntary. I won $1 million. I want to say thank you to God. So I bring a korban toda. There's no obligation to bring a korban toda if you win $1 million. You want to bring a korban to say thank you, like I mentioned in the podcast that Zeb was mentioning earlier. Instead of taking 10 friends out to the bar, to a restaurant and partying because you got into medical school and you're all excited, beautiful, take them to the temple and turn it into a religious experience. That's the korban toda, right? So you have voluntary and obligatory. So the obligatories is a sin offering if you violate certain types of sin, and then you have communal and personal. So the Torah and Vayikra opens up with the voluntary korbanot. We don't want to start with the negative. The chatat and the yasham, those are obligatory because you did something wrong. So those are, you have to bring chatat and the sham. But olah, mincha, and shlamim can be brought into the Nevah. There also is korbanot shlamim, that's a chova. The korban pesach is obligatory. It's an individual korban, obligatory, but it's a shlamim. So some of these korbanot have obligatory and voluntary. But the Torah begins, Sefer Vayikra, with voluntary korbanot. And it begins with an olah, because that's the greatest voluntary, because the olah, you don't need anything. Goes 100, that's why it's called a korban olah. It's what they translate in English, a burnt offering, right? That's how they always translate it. It's funny, like it's a funny thing. Olah means to go up. It's the uprising offering. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But it means the whole thing is burnt. 100% is burnt on the altar, and none of it is shared. So that's, so back to where we're learning. So after the Torah goes through all these 5 types of korbanot, then there's subcategories, right? So you got the olah, the mincha. In the Torah and Vayikra, the shlamim comes next. I don't know. I have to look why they change it here. And then you have the sin offering, and asham is, what do they call it? A guilt offering. Let's say if you lie in court and then you admit your lie, you steal money, different things you bring asham. A chatat is brought for one of, there are 36 sins in the Torah that if you violate them, 34 negative, 2 positive, Brit Milah and Korban Pesach are the 2 positives, or if you don't do it, or you do the other 34 sins, you eat chametz on Pesach, you eat on Yom Kippur, your wife doesn't go to mikvah, etc., Shabbos, that's a karet, and you bring a Korban Chatat. If you violated accidentally, if you violated purposely, you don't bring a korban. An asham is for purposeful sins, for certain types, not so many. The chatat is you made a mistake and a serious issue of Jewish law. It's really only 31 of the 36. Again, the technical details are not important. So a couple of them don't have a sin offering, but it's basically karet. And then and then in Parshat Vayikra we introduce the korbanot. And Parshat said we go over the korbanot. We give the details of the way they're brought. I mean how they're brought. And the Torah always introduces the expression Zot Torah, right? How does the Torah begin? How does it begin? How does the parsha begin on it here? Zot Torah Zevach Hashlamim, right? Zot Torah Ha'olah, Zot Torah Ha'asham, right? This is the law. Torah, this is, by the way, it's very, what does the word Torah mean in general? Like we keep the Torah. So Torah and the Torah doesn't mean the Torah. It means a set of law. I mean, the word Torah means, of course, instructions, lohorot. That's what the words mean. So the Torah is our guidebook to life. It's our instruction. Why did I lose it now? What is it? 7:37, right? Okay, here we go. So now the Torah went through everything. So this is a summary verse. So this is the verse we say in Yaeli. It says V'zod HaTorah, or Zod HaTorah, right? V'zod HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei Yisrael. So that has a little bit of a broader context, right? So this is the laws. How do they in terms of the rituals? Okay. All right. Lola for the mincha, lachatat lasham. Now the miluim, that's not a korban. I mean, this is the Shivat Yemei Miluim. That's what Rabbi Helfgott spoke about last night. These are the 7 days of preparing the Kohanim to be concentrated when we're about to consecrate the temple. It's really a continuation of Pekudei. Then on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, exactly 1 year later, from the beginning of the Exodus, from Rosh Chodesh, when they were told about the Exodus, they dedicate the Mishkan, 7 days of Miluim, and Vayihi Bayom Hashmini, that's next week's portion, that's when Nadav and Avihu die. Because of the die, and that's, according to some, I think that's why you have the whole issue of Pesach Sheni, because if you assume, that's I think a little bit debatable, if they died on Rosh Chodesh or the 8th of Nisan, so if they died on the 8th of Nisan, the people dealing with their body were Tameh, they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach. That's the people who came to Moshe, hey, why do we get left out of Korban Pesach? We want to bring it, and that's where Pesach Sheni starts. So it's the 5 korbanot and the miluim. Then particular korbanot go into these categories. There are 9 types of korban mincha. A nazir, all kinds of different people have to bring mincha. And again, there are communal ones and there are individual ones, and that's true. So the korban dita, people are bored by korbanot, obviously, because it's not applicable and we don't relate to it so much. But whatever, it's It is, I will mention why. Does anybody know why Seder Kochim has Gemara in it? Right? We were saying the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, right? There's a Yerushalmi on Shkalim. Because you live in Israel, these are important. So there's a Talmud Yerushalmi on all the ones in Shrine. Trumot, Masrot, Bikurim, Orla. We don't have Talmud because the rabbis in Babylonia, it was irrelevant, these laws to them. So they didn't spend their time on it. That's an important point. If they spent their time on practical things that mattered. So they learned Nashim, Moed, Nizikin. And they didn't learn Taharas, purity. Who cares about purity and impurity? It was not totally relevant. We're all impure. It's not relevant. So in Israel, there isn't on Taharas either in the Yerushalmi, I don't think, but there is the Bavli Zeraim. But there is a lot of Talmud. There's a Masechet Zvachim. There's a Masechet Menachos. Why? Why is there a tractate? They didn't have those sacrifices. Anybody? Morris, you ever think of that question? Why is there Talmud Bavli on the sacrificial rites of the temple? They were not applicable. Remember, the Mishnah itself was written 150 years later, was edited, was compiled in the year 220. So forget the Gemara. It's in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is having all of Jewish stuff, but the Gemara, they're 200 years, 300, 400 years later, living 500 miles away. They weren't going to spend their time on the only Nida as in Torah. They weren't going to spend time on Ohelos. What's it on Ohel, this, and Matame, this? Who cares? It was not relevant. So
well, maybe some Israeli rabbis lived in Babylon.
So why do they only do korbanos? I mean, it's true. There was back and forth. It depends on what generation. Eventually, you lose their right.
And it should be discussed.
So the reason I understand because it says the verse Unashalma Parim Svatina because korbanos. We know the negative attitude towards korbanot, or there's the attitude of the Rambam in general. Korbanos is not ideal ever. That the philosophy in Plil is more real. But even if you take the view of the Ramban that korbanos aren't ideal, and I must say, reading the Chumash, the Ramban sounds more convincing than the Rambam. The Rambam was, of course, heavily criticized. He gives a historical approach. The Rambam, you look in the Chumash, korbanos is so macho. It's very hard to say that. You can say certain things. Yes, for slavery, you can say, okay, the Torah doesn't. It's clear the Torah doesn't like slavery. But they allowed it, they elevated it. But to say the Torah didn't really think korbanos was good was just because that generation needed it, because that's the worship God. That's much harder to say, much harder to say. Okay, but that's what the Rambam said. But leaving that aside, even the Ramban, but we know what the prophets say. We know what Yirmiyahu says. God did not command you to bring sacrifice. What do you didn't command you to bring sacrifices? Yeshayahu, read every prophet. They hate sacrifices because sacrifice has to be brought. So the sacrifice is just the indication that we're a proper person. The sacrifice itself is really just a symbol. It's the mind. That's why it's very strange halacha. Only by sacrifices. Maybe we won't get to. Maybe we'll take the whole class. Okay. Only by sacrifices do a thought invalidate it. Right, this idea that a thought. I'm thinking about when I'm eating matzah. Hi, Debbie. Welcome back. Nice to have you. After a number of weeks in Israel, glad to have you back. So after I'm eating matzah, I don't really like matzah, so I'm going to think about bread, and maybe it'll taste better. Think about bread. I really is bread. So you don't say, oh, you had a bread in mind, so the matzah, you don't fulfill the mitzvah. That's ridiculous. But on a korban, even if you say, I'm going to eat it in 2 days, I don't want to eat it all in one day because there's too much leftovers that I can't eat it in one day. So, no, the whole korban, it's pigul. Parate. It's one of the 36 cards. Like, what? What? Because I thought I might, even if you didn't eat it then, just the thought. This is insane. So the whole notion of korbanos is totally different. The action doesn't matter. It's the thought process matters. You're doing tshuva, if it's a sin offering, whatever, coming close to God. So uneshama parim sifatenu. Our lips will fulfill when Avram Avinu asked God, "Vama eda ki yerishenu," how will I know that I'll inherit the land? The pretim terms. So God says, take this sacrifice, do this and that, blah blah blah. Do all this. V'schut korbanot. So Avram said, "That's very nice. Tinach Bizman Shebeit HaMikdash Chaim. This works when the temple's standing. What's going to happen when the temple's not standing? What is going to be our merit? Don't worry. Just say the korbanot. Just say them. That's just as good as bringing them. Wow. So that's why Rabbeinu Yonah. We discussed this 214 weeks ago, whatever, when we started this whole series. Rabbeinu Yonah says that saying korbanot in the morning is a biblical mitzvah. It's more important than Shmon Esrei. Shmon Esrei is only a rabbinic mitzvah, but the korbanos. So there was a time in my life I was whatever. So I used to say all the korbanos for many years, a number of years, said all the korbanos. Today I'm not so, what can I tell you? But I do say the korban tamid every day, that I never miss the korban tamid. And I say the ola and ezu humakoman, and I tell people at least say that. Psuke de Zimra is not even a minhag, it's a midat chasidus. So that's why it's the saying of korbanos, it's as if you're bringing it. So therefore, that's what I think Rav Shachter, I heard this from, but maybe I heard it from other somewhere else, is that's why there's Masechet Zvachim Menachot, because I don't have to bring the korban to fulfill the mitzvah of korbanos. So just learning about korban. When I learned about matzah, I didn't fulfill the mitzvah of matzah. There is a mitzvah, Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayedaber Moshe and Moadei Hashem Bnei Israel. Moshe spoke, so the Gemara says you're supposed to talk about Pesach and Shavuot on Shavuos and Sukkos. Okay, but you don't fulfill the mitzvah of matzah by learning about matzah. I don't have a lulav, so I'll learn about lulav, that's good. No, okay, learn about lulav. But when I learn about korbanos, it's the same thing. It's like I brought a hood. You don't have to bring the animal. Just learn about it. So that's why. It's unless you have some other explanation. So that's why the rabbis in Babel spent time on Zvachim and Menachot. They didn't spend any time on Tumah v'Tahara. There's no Beit HaMikdash. They didn't spend any time on Trumas or Masrot or Maser Sheni or Orla. Orla does apply in Chutz La'aretz, but they still didn't spend. I don't know why there's no Masachet Orla, because Orla does apply in Chutz La'aretz, but whatever. Anyway, so that's it. So that's it's important to know. So the Korbanot have this very interesting role, even though they don't apply, they do apply. And so anyway, so these are the 5 korbanot we bring. So and the miluim, and that's what we say. Now, if you notice, if you look in your siddur, it says vit toda le'ola. Vit toda. Now, a korban toda, which is in this week's parsha, we spoke right at the beginning, but Zev has asked me, is a korban shlamim. It's one of the korbanot shlamim, is a korban toda. So it says in vit toda ve'ola ve'lechat ve'lamincha ve'lachata ve'lasham ve'leshlamim ve'levim kol korbanecha. Right? So it's very interesting. What's that word vit toda? So it's the korban toda. So the art scroll wouldn't say this. The RCA Siddur says that it's a printing mistake, and you can see why. Toda should be Torah. It should be vit Torah. It's very, very sharp, and you see how easily Torah and Todah, the resh, some remember there's no printing, some copyist, put the resh into a dalit, and then it got copied into every siddur, vit Todah v'lo, but it should be vit Torah v'lo. Okay, I just find that's very interesting. That's what does anybody have an RCA siddur? We spoke about that's one of the lost siddurim. It took the RCA so long to put it out. I don't think anybody has it, but it's a very interesting siddur. So that's what they write in their comment, that vit todah v'lo should really be vit Torah. Okay. And then what do we say? We say Zechor nila asher nasa v'hashiva ala batachasela alalecha v'yashrei yoshvei ve'itecha. Okay, then we say Zechor nila asher nasa. So Zechor, now this is a prayer to God. God, please remember the Jewish people. Zechor nila, the people who yearned for you. Zechor nila asher nasa, that you carried them. The people who you carried them. Zechor nila means we are a tired nation, actually. Asher nasa, you had to carry us. We're tired. In the desert, God carries us, right? And return us to the land, because we're living in Bava, we're living in Poland, we're living in Germany, we're living in Spain, we're living in America. So Canada, whatever. So this, of course, was component people aren't living. You have to understand most of Jewish history, the Jews have not been living in Israel. And you had, 18 and a half Jews living there. But and all our important works of Jewish history were not composed in the land of Israel, except the Mishnah, which is maybe the most important work. You have to write the Mishnah is composed in Israel. That's why in Hebrew. Think of any other major Jewish work except the Shulchan Aruch. So I remember Rabbi Rakefet telling us, I don't know if it's true, but the big Zionist that he is, if you know Rabbi Rakefet, that he believes that is the reason the Shulchan Aruch became the accepted code of Jewish law. Whereas, why don't we accept the Levush? Or that was, or the Rambam even. Why the Rambam's very nice. People learn the Rambam, but outside of Yemenite Jews, people don't really use the Rambam for Psak Halacha. They follow the Shulchan Aruch. The Rabbi Rakefet wanted to claim because it was written in Israel. That was the Torah, all the other major codes, the Torah, the Rambam, everything else was not written in Israel. So because of Eretz Yisrael, the real reason is because that's what the Jewish people accepted. That's how halacha works, right? That's where Moshe Feinstein's famous answer. How did he become a great poet? He doesn't know. Somebody asked him a question, he answered. The next day, somebody else asked him a question, more people. And that is how halacha works, how the people accept you as authority. It's bottom up. The people decide who are the rabbis they're going to ask their questions to. Today, people like asking certain types of rabbis. It used to be in Jewish history, people used to like asking rabbis who were lenient. I mean it. Jewish, so the rabbis who were popular, the great poskim, were on the quote unquote mekilim. They weren't like, they were all had a more open, I don't know, whatever you want, a more lenient view, because that's what people wanted. That's what people ask questions to. Today, very often people look for rabbis who are strict. So they look for the strictest. They want to be, and that's the Mishnah Berurah is like, it's a whole different world. But okay, that's not for now. That's for the sociology and development of halakha. But that is basically how it works. It's how people, it's who gets accepted as our authorities. That's how halacha works. What was I saying right before that? Oh yeah, so because the Shulchan Aruch was in the land of Israel, that's why it was accepted.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, in 1 second. The real reason I said why was it accepted by the Jewish people? Because the Ramah wrote comments to it in Poland. And the Rambam couldn't be accepted because he has no other opinions and he has no sources. It was just my way or the highway. People weren't willing to accept it. And the Torah, everything's written from a certain perspective. The Shulchan Aruch has the advantage. Why it became the Shulchan Aruch? Because the Ramah, the Ashkenazi authority in Poland, wrote his comments that got incorporated into the Shulchan Aruch. So it was one size fits all. It was short. It was the shortest of all the codes. That's the reason. Okay, Gershon, what do you want to ask?
I want to know, was the Shulchan Aruch really composed in Tzfat? Or
it wasn't Tzfat. That's what I'm saying. The Rav Yosef Karo part of the Shulchan.
Was it composed in Tzfat?
Yes, it was.
Or in Aleppo?
No, in Tzfat. Rav Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch after he got smicha, not like he went to YU and he got smicha or Tim Demir. And no, he got the real McCoy smicha, the real, the Moshe Rabbeinu smicha that was given to Yeshua. He got that smicha, right? As we know, smicha is meant to go from generation to generation. I've said many times the Romans didn't get it. So the Romans gave in to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he said, you can go to Yavne. And they didn't, boy, oh boy, if they would have known what was happening, they would have never acceded to that request. And Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said, we don't need a temple, forget the temple. If we korbanos are meaningless, it's all meaningless. We're going to rebuild Judaism. So everybody else thought, what's Judaism? Without the temple, there's no Judaism. So a bunch of old Jews are learning in Yavne. Who cares? They'll die out in a generation. And they didn't understand. No, it's who cares that there's a temple. Real Judaism is in the Mishnah. It's found in the Mishnah. So they went. Then the Romans woke up, or they woke up and they said, no, we got to get rid of Jewish law. So we got to ban smicha. So because without smicha you can't have a Sanhedrin. So they banned smicha, and that's Rabbi Shua ben Bava, who is it? Oh God, one of the Asar Haruge Malchut. I forget now which one. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, maybe? He gave smicha, and the Romans speared him to
Ben Tabai.
It was Rav Yehuda ben Baba, right, Aviva? Yeah.
Ben Tabai, wasn't it?
Really? Oh, I don't know, Ben Tava. I don't know. I thought it was Rav Yehuda ben Baba. I'm not sure now. Thank you. You can look it up or put it. I don't know who. So who's Rav Yehuda ben Tava? I don't know who that is. I think. Okay. Anyway, so they banned smicha because without smicha you can't have a Sanhedrin. And then the Jews who gave smicha, and they succeeded in that, banning smicha. But the Rambam writes you can recreate smicha. This is one of the Yira Eli Rambams, where the Rambam never quotes his sources. That's one of the critiques of the Rambam. But the Rambam has sources. That's what all the commentaries are, what there's a source of the Rambam. But every once in a while, the Rambam writes Yira Eli. I think. So when the Rambam writes, I think he's telegraphing to you. I don't really have a source. I can't prove this to you from the sources. But I think my intuition of how Judaism works, and I think the sources point this way, is that if all the rabbis would agree, we can recreate smicha. And that's what Rav Yaakov Beirab did in the 16th century after the Spanish Inquisition, and 7 people got smicha. And did this create a hullabaloo? You can read Jacob Katz's article on this. Oh my gosh. They went crazy, the other rabbis, and obviously it didn't last. But Rav Yosef Kar was one of the 7 people who got smicha. I got smicha, so now I'm going to write the constitution of the Jewish people, the Shulchan Aruch. That's how I think, is it Achursky? I think it has that as the reason. Why did Rav Yosef Kar set out to write the Shulchan Aruch? There are a variety of reasons, but this is one of the reasons. So when he got smicha, now you can only get smicha in Eretz Yisrael. You can't get smicha in Chutz La'aretz. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, Torah Hashem Yerushalayim. That's the halakhic. It's not just some nice song we sing. We take out the Torah has halakhic implications. The center of Torah smicha can only be given in Eretz Yisrael. Once you have smicha, you can go to Chutz La'aretz and serve as a dayan, whatever. But the smicha has to be given only on the Israel. Can you give it on Zoom? I don't know. But if the rabbis in Israel and you're there, I don't know. That's after real smicha. We'll worry about that when they tried in 1948. I mentioned this before. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Maimon tried to reinstitute that. That was the first year in my life I ever heard from Avraham Lichtenstein. I was in the Kurs Kollel. I was 22 years old. I had just come to YU. I was starting in Smicha, and I didn't learn in Gush. Maybe I had heard Rabbi Lichtenstein speak on a Shabbos, a Sicha, but it's the first time I ever heard him give a Gemara share in Masechet Sanhedrin, and he spoke about Hichachut HaSanhedrin Bizman Hazeh. He mentioned the book written by Yehuda Leib Maimon, a plea in 1944, first minister of religion in the state of Israel. He was quite a character and a very learned person. He was a very big Talmid Chacham. He wasn't a Gadol B'Yisrael, but he was, the next tier of great rabbis. And so he pleaded with the rabbis. We have a state of Israel. We need a Sanhedrin. I mentioned Heichal Shlomo was going to be the seat of the Sanhedrin. And then the Brisker Rav put Heichal Shlomo into Cherem. And my first cousin would not walk into Heichal Shlomo because it's in Cherem. You're not allowed to walk in because it's okay. Anyways, that's how life works. Thank God. I think today maybe people don't know about the Cherem. I think people do walk into. I don't know what's going on. But anyways, that's why the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so back here. But so because it was written in Israel, I don't know, maybe, but that's what we say. But Torah does emanate from Israel. Okay, so Cornel Asher Nasa Vashi Balad Matecha, take us back here. Lansel Halacha. Okay, let's got to finish the next 2 paragraphs, but they're short because everything else is the same. Dak al dak, you can hear the poetry. Dak al dak. Whether this was once an alphabetical acrostic and we lost all the lines, I don't know. We said that by Dakanun for sure. But here you hear all I don't know that etz yatzva likratecha. I don't know. Dak al dak. L'tayek, to be precise and exacting. That's, I think, what the dak al dak here means. What our school translate is painstakingly exact, beyond calculation. Dakad ein nivdak. In other words, you're so precise, I can't mark you. I can't, it's so precise, I can't tell the difference because it's so miduyak, as we say in Hebrew. Ulitvunoto ein cheker. To God's wisdom, there's no measure. It's unbelievable. It's an unbridgeable gap between God and man. So Ha'el Hanorah, the awesome, powerful God, ba'achat skira. In one look, that's like a very Rosh Hashanah theme, that God judges the world, right? Every Kavakor and Roa Edro. In one sense, God looks at everybody at one time, but he judges everybody individually. Bein tov l'ra yivaker. God can tell the difference between good and bad, right? What's exactly, you can talk about if we're the korbanot. In a certain sense, I don't know if what it means here. I don't know if that was the author intent, but I think it could mean that God knows our thoughts when we bring korban, because we just said that a thought invalidates a korban. Obviously, nobody knows what your thoughts are. Only you know and God. So God is so precise, he's so beyond b'chatskira. I mean, there's nothing. God is judging if the people are good or bad, but it also could be on this sense of our thoughts. Being tov l'rav care what's a good korban, what's not a good korban. God can examine it, right? We know korbanos that we saw. I mentioned the korban Pesach. The Jewish people had to take it on the 10th and sacrifice it on the 14th. They had 4 days to look it over. That is the halacha that a korban needs 4 days to check it doesn't have any mumim. You're not allowed to put a a blemish. It's sort of politically incorrect, if an animal is missing an eye, like we today, and it's good. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, a good thing. We look at people with handicaps. We say that's just disability. We don't look at them there's God forbid a defect. And the truth matters where we allow. I was going to talk about Birchas Kohanim a little bit. We're not going to get there. That we allow people who have quote unquote defects that in the Shulchan Aruch says they can't duchen. We allow them today to duchen. Because in the Shulchan Aruch, people didn't, the idea is they're blessing you. Ugh, I don't want that guy who's missing an arm to bless me. I only want, So we, thank God, today have different attitudes. And we don't look at it, oh my gosh, some people might. But so therefore, the halacha used to be if a person had a blemish, he couldn't duchen. And today we're very lenient about that we say no, if the people accept the blessing. So it's saying, so on the Mizbeach, you were not allowed to bring any animal with any blemish. So that had to be checked over for 4 days to make sure there are no blemishes. Sounds like a long time. I don't know what the checklist and how they did it exactly, but whatever. Which is why we say slichas the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, right? You all know that. No, doesn't everyone know that one, right? We say slichas because you need a minimum of 4 days to check, right? We know if Rosh Hashanah is on Wednesday night, you can say slichas the Saturday night before. But if Rosh Hashanah is on Sunday night or Monday night, right? When Erev Pesach on Shabbos, like last year, so Rosh Hashanah will be on Monday night. So then you have to start slichas the week before. An extra week of slichas, not because you need 4 days for slichas minimum before Rosh Hashanah, because we're offering ourselves. We're like the korban. We're coming to God, and we have to make sure we don't have any blemishes. So we need a minimum of 4 days. That's so it has to be. That's so
interesting.
Oh, you didn't know that? Okay.
No.
So then why do we start that? That's how they're saying right away in Hilchot Rosh Hashanah. I think it's in the Mishnah Berurah, if I'm not mistaken. I might be, but that's how they all explain. So why not start 4 days before? Start on Thursday. No, you always want to start Saturday night. So the main, I think it's the Mishnah Berurah explain because it's confusing to people. This year Slichas is Thursday and that Tuesday. That's too confusing. There is something to that. People in time, everybody. I think it's more than that. I think there's something about b'motzei menucha, it's a whole mood after Shabbos. It's somehow you wait a few hours till Chatzot, hopefully, whatever, or midnight, whatever. You wait and you do your slichas then. But they say the Saturday night is not important. It's the 4 days that are important. And then they say you also need 4 days for those pious people. We don't have people. I mean, maybe we do, but I don't know any of them. They would fast for 10 days before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Now, in the day, like a third of Ramadan. I mean, think what the Muslims go through every month. They have a month. Can you imagine? And when Ramadan's in Tammuz or Av, this year was in Adar. It's always, our lunar months. So, but they don't have a solar system, a solar calendar to change it. So sometimes it's another, sometimes it's in Shvat, and sometimes it's in Tammuz or Av. So you're fasting till 10 o'clock at night every night. Oh my gosh. So we got it pretty easy. Don't complain. So people used to fast much more. They name us the food. We have food. So they want to fast for 10 days. No, in a Ser Timei Tshuva, there are 4 days you're not allowed to fast. 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, and Erev Yom Kippur. So that's only 6 days you can fast in a Ser Timei Tshuva. So I need an extra 4 days to fast. That's the other reason for slichas. But anyway, so that's Bein tov l'rav yivaker, so that's what we said. God judges everybody. And by the way, we know every yontif is a Yom Adin. Every yontif is a miniature Yom Kippur. Mentioned this many times. First of all, Yom Kippur is not a Yom Adin in the Mishnah. The Yom Adin is Rosh Hashanah. It's not Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is just some paitan made up with a tanatokef. I mean, I'm only half joking, but the Gemara has this idea that the books are open and then they get shut on Yom Kippur. So, Rosh Hashanah yikatemu Yom Kom yikatemu. If you learn the Mishnah, it's not exactly what it says. It says a Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Adin, not Yom Kippur. So there are 4 Yom Adins. There's Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. We mentioned for Teruah. I think we just mentioned this, just a couple of weeks ago again, right? On Sukkot for water, on Shavuot for wheat. That's why we bring Korban Omer, the wheat Korban. We bring the fruit Korban on Shavuot, is on for the fruit. So every Yontiv is a little bit of Yom Adin, and that's why there's Yisker on the Yom Tov. That's what we spoke about. I think I mentioned that very recently. So every Yontiv does have a Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah themes to it, and it is have it, and we'll speak especially by Tal and Geshem, where the Chazan will wear a kittel, right? He wears a kittel, and even the Kaddish, which I couldn't think of last week. Do I get it? Is that Nila? No, that is Tal. Is Gadol. Shmei Rabbah, that is Tal, right? I think I got that right. But you can tell that you sound like already you're in the Rosh Hashanah mood. It's got that aspect because that's what Yontif really is. Okay, so and then we say the same thing. We quote that pasuk from this week's parsha. Then we say Zechor Nelah, God, remember us. You carried us. You returned us. You shall return us to our land. Or maybe we can say today, you have returned us to our land. Selah halach, and then we finish Ashrei Yeshvitecha. We say this right before Ashrei. Ashrei Yeshvitecha is the same thing. Is Etziat Tzva Likratecha, right? What's Ashrei? We want to sit in your home. Ashrei Yeshvitecha. That's what this is. And we don't think about it because we say Ashrei 3 times a day, so we don't realize that's Ashrei. We're praying to God that we can sit in your presence. That's what Ya'alis. Etziat Tzva Likratecha. Let me come. And then, so we say this right before Ashrei Yosh. Blessed is the person, how fortunate is the person who can sit in your home. What's God's home? In the Beit HaMikdash. That's God's home. Okay, then the third paragraph, and Adon Tzvaot, Baroplaot, Chiber, okay, Adon Tzvaot, I don't know, master of the, how do they translate Tzvaot? I don't know. Here they translate legions. That's sort of an army, Tzava. It's that same idea. Adon Tzvaot, the master of the world, Baroplaot, with many wonders. Chiber Kol Oalo. God, through many wonders, united, Chiber, or he made Kol Oalo. This is his tent. His tent is the world. God created the world with, we know on Pesach, Otot Umoftim, right? Bapela, wow. So God, Atot Tzvaot, with many wonders, Chiber Kol Oalo, I think it's the idea, the word Chiber, the whole world is like, comes together. It all has a purpose, just like our whole body works as one, right? There are 248 positive mitzvot. Each represents an aspect of the body because every mitzvot is interconnected. It's all one system. There's a chibur, there's a unity to, and of course, Yontiv is a time of Jewish unity. It's supposed to be that we come together. I believe that's why the Meshech Chachma says you can cook on Yontiv. I saw this years ago. I have to look for it again. The last time I looked for it, I couldn't find it, which maybe means I'm mistaken. I thought it was the Meshech Chachma explains that one of the reasons the Torah allows cooking on Yontiv, because Yontiv is Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. Shabbat is Bein Adam L'Makom. We recognize Shabbat also is Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. Of course, remember our slavery. Don't mistreat others, but it begins with our relationship to God. It's fixed. It's every 7 days. It's God's creation of the world. Yontiv is Jewish history. It's Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. We come together at the temple. So that's why. So we can cook. Somebody comes to your house, you're not going to give them food. That was the whole thing with the non-Jew come to your house, right? You can cook, but only for Jews. This is can't cook for non-Jews on Yom Tov. Okay, but so there's a chibur b'niti v'at leiv with the goodness of nediv, a giveness of his heart from one heart to another heart, so to speak. B'niti v'at leiv l'b'leiv, from the heart to the heart, right? And hatsur tamim pa'alo. That's a pasuk in Hazinu. Hatsur tamim chod racham mishpat. that God is perfect. We don't understand God, we don't understand his ways, but there's a belief that even when we not the way we would choose, God has some master plan. Doesn't mean we sometimes we want to change his master plan. Moshe Rabbeinu said, taught him you can change God's master plan, whatever. But Hatzur Tamim Palo, God is a rock. It means that it's stable, it doesn't change, right? Tamim is pure and perfect, Tam, innocent, Yaakov Ishtam, not like the Tamat the Seder, right? We always translate the Tamat the Seder as foolish. It can mean that. The Yerushalmi calls him a tipesh, but I also think it means innocent and pure, Yaakov Ishtam. He has a certain innocence to him. He doesn't, I just believe in God. Mazot, I don't need all this fancy explanations. So it's a simplicity, not sophisticated, but there's a purity. And I don't have to tell you, that's different people. And, certain people have a very tmimis attitude towards religion. They can say, and if it works for you, that's very good. I think for a lot of us, that doesn't work. We have much more complex relationship, and that's also the Rambam, the different thing. But here we're talking about God's purity and God's simplicity in a sense. But God is Hatzur Tamim, he's perfect. And then the total, and then we say Ashri. So that's it. This little piyut that took us a long time to discuss, because there are all kinds of things that always come up. Everything relates to some other topic, and then we say Ashri, going into Musaf. So it's a little short piyut that we say, and basically as we prepare for Musaf on Yamim Tovim, we introduce the Simcha. Probably the reason we don't say it on Rosh Hashanah, so the same reason we don't say it on Yizkor. We don't say this on Rosh Hashanah for Muslim. Why not? Why don't we want to be in the temple? So there's no mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel on Rosh Hashanah, right? You understand this is connected to Aliyah L'Regel, but also the mood of Rosh Hashanah. There's a very joyous mood, and it doesn't fit so well. And with that, I said I was going to maybe talk a little about Birchas Kohanim, so just for 1 minute, I'll just mention that why do we only duchen? Why in Chutz La'aretz? Why do we only duchen on Yom Tov? The Sephardim duchen every day, but Ashkenazim only duchen. Why? There's a mitzvah in Torah we assume is to duchen every day.
It's simcha to duchen.
Right, so it's right. So that's the standard reason given, right? Good, Susan. That you need simcha. Why do you need simcha for more than any other mitzvah? A Jew should always Ivdu Hashem Simcha. We started this year Mizmor 100, Mizmor Latota, Ivdu Hashem Simcha. That's always. So what's taka? Birchas Kohanim has to be with joy. I mean it's also very strange. It really is strange, even if that's true. So I'm not going to eat matzah because I have to eat matzah because I'm happy, but I'm in exile. Matzah is redemption. I don't want to eat matzah. Like what do you mean? I'm not happy. Right? There's actually, so I'm not going to do Birchas Kohanim. So that's taka why the Sephardim say, and that's why the Vilna Gaon tried to reinstitute it. As people said, this reason doesn't make sense. But let's make sense of the reason. Who cares? What does that have to do with anything? So what I heard from Rabbi Berglas, I mentioned him last week actually, and I gave my shir about him last week. Those who knew Rabbi Berglas, I'm not going to die. He wouldn't have time. He taught me Mishnah for 4 years in Toronto. He was rabbi of Shartville, married Fabian Schumpeld's daughter, just for those in New York. And he made Aliyah when he finished teaching our class. After grade 13, he made Aliyah in 1980, founded Mishresh and Moriah in Italy. He just passed away this past week. They're getting up from Shiva now, I believe. This morning, the funeral was on Sunday. I heard about last Friday, and he taught me for 4 years. Had a real impact on my life. So I remember hearing from him this explanation that Ba'ava, we say that Kohanim have to bless people with love, but levarech lemoiseh ba'ava, and if their love and joy go together. If Kohen is not in a joyous mood, he can't express love, and we don't want a blessing that's not full of love. It's a very beautiful idea. Whether it's really means halachically you can't do it, you can argue about it. It's a nice drasha, but the Ramah does say a mourner doesn't duchen. Someone in a velus doesn't duchen for that reason. They don't have that love and that ahava. So it is interesting. Okay, we'll stop here just very quickly. So what a review. We said you got to stand. We want to come to the Beit HaMikdash. Yontif is the holiday of the Beit HaMikdash. All the extra korbanot we bring. We went through how many korbanot we bring on every Yontif, and there are more in Sukkot, and the Jewish people coming together. And that's why this piyut, of course, is said before Musaf, that's what Yontif is all about. Extra Musaf coming to the Beit HaMikdash, and it's a prayer that God should bring us back to the Beit HaMikdash, and it's centered around the pasuk that we're going to read tomorrow. Which, by the way, it wasn't like this when it was like this when this piyut came. We always read Parshat Tzav in a non-leap year. That means 12 out of 19 years. Whenever there's a non-leap year, Tzav is always read on Shabbos HaGadol. Of course, in a leap year like next year, it never is read on Shabbos HaGadol. So I don't know. I'm not claiming. I'm just thinking out loud. If this was composed after the annual cycle, maybe that's why they quote a pasuk from our parsha, but I would assume not. Pasuk is quoted because the Beit HaMikdash, the place of korbanot. So they quote the pasuk that summarizes all the 5 different types of korbanot that we discussed. Okay, we'll stop here. 2 shiurim on Sunday, Rabbi Liebtag and Benny Gesundheit in English. Benny gave last week on Nagat in Hebrew. Benny shiur this Sunday will be in English at 1 p.m. Monday, we'll have Karen Miller-Jackson speaking for the first time for Torah Motion. Rabbi Karen Miller-Jackson lives in Ranana, and Sophia Freudenstein, who's Maharat Sophia Freudenstein, but the Yoetzet Halacha. Sophia Freudenstein, who's a graduate of Chat. Her mother is a colleague of mine in Chat and is serving now in Finland, in Helsinki. Very interestingly, and then that will be Monday, and as I mentioned, Tuesday morning at 9:30. I'll give a sort of short divrei Torah that hopefully you can use at the Seder. Everybody's welcome to listen to my podcast on Nagat. It's over an hour, but you'll let me know if it's worthwhile. And want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. I don't know who is planning to go to Israel for Pesach and is staying home now. If not, okay, what can we say? Hopefully we can all go to Israel, go to the Beit HaMikdash. That's what Yaeli is all about. Become the Beit HaMikdash, and the Beit HaMikdash, as I said, it represents peace in the world, and I'll think, when did I? Okay. Just let me take a very quick look at the question. Warren Buffett lives in the house, living 60 years old. Good, so he can put his boots in shul. Okay. If he wears his boots in his own. Yeah, Warren Buffett is special that way. Really is. He's someone who's came obviously a gazillionaire and has not lost his humility, from what I can tell. I really think it's amazing. And what he did, the giving pledge, Warren Buffett is one of the Hasidic Umat Olam. The amount of philanthropy that he's inspired is unbelievable. Okay, beautiful. You have the RCA Siddur. Why did the German Kila not say, I have no idea. I didn't know they didn't say it, but thank you. I'd have to look into it. I don't know. I guess it's a later edition. They were against Kabbalah Shabbos, I mentioned that, and they say it very differently, verse by verse. Rabbi Hirsch didn't want to introduce Numin Hakim, apparently, very orthodox in that, in Bathing Reform maybe. So that could be why, because it's new and they just didn't, and not, but I don't know for sure when did I say peach, but it could be instead of Pesach. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Look forward to learning with you, and be well. That's your good news.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Bye-bye, thanks.